of the most important bands for my musical development was a band called Level 42. Level 42 has been one of my favorite bands since even before I started playing the drums. So in the beginning, they were a four-piece outfit. Mike Lindup, Mark King, of course, one of the greatest bassists ever in the world of all time. And the two brothers, Boone and Phil Gould. Phil was the drummer. And he is easily one of my top 5 favorite drummers of all time in the history of the universe. Philip Gould, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the most important drummers that not nearly enough people talk about. The funny thing is, when I first started getting into the Level 42, like heavy, I was actually more into keys at that time. I was pretty into, you know, keys and synths and all that kind of stuff. So I was actually paying a lot more attention to Mike Lindup, trying to lift all his licks and stuff like that. But, you know, I never stopped listening to their music. And by the time I actually got into the drums, it wasn't until the World Machine album dropped that I realized the genius of Phil's playing. Now, I mentioned in the first episode of Heroes, when I was talking about Mark Brzezicki, I can say that right now. Thanks everyone for correcting me on that. But I mentioned in the first episode that the criteria for this series was I was trying to compile a list of drummers that to this day I still rip off on a regular basis. And I was trying to think of what exactly is it, or was it, that I stole from Phil's playing. And it really wasn't anything too specific. The biggest overall thing that, that really affected my playing, as far as when I was playing along to Level 42 albums and doing all the practicing and stuff, for those out there that are big fans of Phil Gould as well, you guys know that his pocket is as thick as cold molasses. Phil Gould is one of the strongest groove players ever to play the instrument. And on the World Machine album, there's some great examples on that album. The one that really got me was A Physical Presence. The groove that he plays in that tune is ridiculously thick, and man, like just the definition of pocket when you hear that tune. So, you know, I would listen to that album front to back, and then finally when I got a set of drums, I would sit down and I would practice to this album every single time I went down to play the drums. So since then, my obsession with Phil and his playing just got deeper and more severe. Because getting that album just caused me to go back and get all the rest of his albums. It was my brother and I, actually. My brother Rich is a professional bass player. The two of us used to sit down and play along to Level 42 albums. We eventually got all of them up until Running in the Family, because Phil was a drummer for 42 up until that album, and then he left. And I remember my brother Rich and I were devastated when we found out that Phil and Boone were leaving the band. And we just weren't interested in that band anymore. That, of course, would soon change, and with the next album, Staring at the Sun, Gary Husband hopped on the kit, and that album was actually pretty cool. But, you know, we were big fans of the original lineup, so we would play along to all of the early albums. But for me, man, like the ones that really stood out, and the ones that I'm going to recommend to you guys if you really want to get in to Phil's playing, there are 4 albums that you really need to get to hear just how strong and how thick this guy's groove is. Standing in the Light, True Colors, World Machine, and Running in the Family. Now, as far as recommended listening for each one of these albums, if you're gonna pick up the World Machine album, take your pick because they're all ridiculous. True Colors, Kansas City Milkman on that album, amazing. My Hero, that's another one that you really need to check out. On the Running in the Family album, there's a tune on there called Sleepwalkers. Wow. You really need to, if you're going to listen to that tune, crank it up to like a good 13 or 14 to hear just the subtleties and just the pocket that Phil plays on these tunes. And I'm going to add a bonus one in there too. There's this live album that came out, I think, in 1985 called A Physical Presence. And on that album, there's a song called Mr. Pink. If you want to hear Phil's chops, check out Mr. Pink, man. Aside from the groove and everything else that he does, like he really is a phenomenal drummer. So yeah, man, Level 42 is probably one of the most important bands for my musical upbringing. If you haven't heard that band before, I highly suggest that you check them out. They're one of the pioneers, if not the pioneers, of the jazz pop genre. These guys are really serious players. The band is still around today. It's got a completely different lineup aside from Mark and Mike Lindup. But I suggest you go back, man. Go back and check out the early stuff. Just Google the discography. You're not going to go wrong with any album that you pick up, but you're really going to be inspired by the music that these guys made. But in particular, man, Phil Gould, you got to check out his playing. There's a bonus that I want to recommend to you guys. There's a live concert DVD called Level 42 Live at Wembley. And we used to watch this, way back in the day when everything was still on VHS. We wore this thing out, man. We used to watch this thing, my brother and I, in the living room on a daily basis. But that is a really cool and inspiring concert to watch for any musician, really. But for drummers especially, man, you get to see Phil up there. He's got the Hawaiian shirt on, big yellow Tama drum kit, and he's just playing the crap out of everything. It's totally inspiring. So, for all my English viewers out there, if anybody out there knows Phil Gould, just pass this note along, man. Just let him know that he's got a big fan over here. He's played a very important part in me even wanting to become a drummer in the first place. Because like I said before, man, I was headed towards keys, but, listening to that music and his drumming was part of the attraction to this instrument. So, Phil, if you're watching, thanks very much, man. You're, like I said, one of the most important drummers that not nearly enough drummers out there are talking about, in my opinion, anyways. And thanks for everything. Thank you guys for watching this. Comment, like, subscribe, all that stuff. And we'll see you in the next episode.